The red dust of Ouagadougou airport swirled in the afternoon heat as Tina Dubois stepped off the plane, her designer sunglasses reflecting the harsh African sun. She had arrived with the radiant smile of someone carrying hope between her hands, someone who had traveled far from the comfortable salons of Paris to this land of resilience and courage. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled despite the long journey, and her white linen dress remained crisp, a symbol of the pristine intentions she claimed to carry. At 35, Tina possessed that particular European confidence that came from a lifetime of privilege. She had studied international development at the Sorbonne, worked briefly for several NGOs in Geneva, and had convinced herself, and many others, that she was destined to save Africa. Her French passport bore stamps from humanitarian missions across 3 continents, each one a badge of her supposed virtue. "Welcome to Burkina Faso," said Dr. Umaru Sawadago, the government liaison assigned to meet her. His weathered hand shook hers warmly, his eyes crinkling with genuine kindness. "We are grateful for your commitment to our people." Tina's smile widened, but behind her designer sunglasses her eyes were calculating. She had studied the country's gold reserves extensively during her flight, not for humanitarian purposes, but for the network of shadow dealers who had recruited her. Burkina Faso produced over 60 tons of gold annually, much of it from small-scale mining operations with minimal oversight. It was perfect for her true mission. "Dr. Sawadogo," she replied in fluent French, her accent carrying just enough emotion to seem heartfelt. "My heart has led me to this beautiful land. I've come to help however I can." Within weeks of her arrival, Tina had established the Hope for Tomorrow Foundation, complete with glossy brochures featuring smiling African children and ambitious mission statements about education, healthcare, and agricultural development. She rented a compound in the upscale Ouaga 2000 district, hired local staff, and began the careful construction of her public image. Her first public appearance was at a school in the Sissin district, where she distributed books and school supplies to hundreds of eager children. The local media covered the event extensively, capturing images of Tina kneeling beside young students, her white dress pristine against the dusty classroom floors. "Madame Tina is like an angel," declared Fatimata Kabore, a local teacher, to the television cameras. "She has brought light to our children's future." The children, with their bright eyes and infectious laughter, genuinely warmed to her. They nicknamed her Tantia Tina, Auntie Tina, and would run after her white Toyota Land Cruiser whenever it appeared in their neighborhoods, chanting her name with pure joy. These moments of authentic connection with the children were perhaps the only times Tina's smile was completely genuine. But even as she played with the children and handed out candy, her trained eye was cataloging the area's resources. The Sissin district sat atop promising gold deposits, and several small mining cooperatives operated in the surrounding hills. She made mental notes of truck routes, security protocols, and the naive trust of local officials. Over the following months, Tina's reputation grew exponentially across Burkina Faso. Her foundation's activities expanded to include medical clinics, agricultural training programs, and microcredit initiatives for women. She had an uncanny ability to identify exactly what each community needed most desperately and provide it with theatrical generosity. In the northern province of Yatenga, she funded the construction of 3 water wells, bringing clean water to villages that had struggled with drought for years. The grateful villagers held a traditional ceremony in her honor, presenting her with hand-woven cloths and declaring her an honorary daughter of their community. In the eastern region near Farangourma, she established mobile medical clinics that traveled to remote villages, providing free health care to thousands of people who had never seen a doctor. Local radio stations broadcast stories of miraculous recoveries, of children saved from malaria, of mothers whose lives were preserved during difficult births. "Tina understands our suffering," said Mariam Ouedraogo, a widow whose 3 children had all received life-saving treatment at one of the clinics. "She doesn't just give us money and leave like other foreigners. She stays. She listens. She cares." The foundation's social media presence was expertly managed, with professional photographers documenting every act of charity. Images of Tina embracing orphaned children, teaching women to read, and working alongside farmers in their fields spread across international networks. Donations poured in from European and American supporters who saw her as the embodiment of effective humanitarianism. But beneath this carefully orchestrated symphony of goodwill, Tina was building an entirely different network. During her travels to remote mining areas, always justified as humanitarian scouting missions, she made contact with local miners, assessing their operations, their production capacity, and most importantly, their vulnerabilities. Her evening phone calls to Europe were conducted in coded language, discussing agricultural exports and mineral samples with contacts in Geneva, Antwerp, and Dubai. She had identified 17 separate mining sites across 4 provinces where gold could be extracted and smuggled without detection. The Foundation's fleet of vehicles, marked with the Hope for Tomorrow logo, became a familiar sight on roads throughout the country. Local checkpoints waved them through without inspection. Who would suspect vehicles carrying medical supplies and educational materials? Hidden compartments were expertly concealed within these trucks, capable of holding significant quantities of raw gold while maintaining the appearance of legitimate humanitarian cargo. Tina recruited a network of local collaborators, mostly desperate young men who needed money to support their families. She never told them the full scope of the operation. Each knew only their small part. Amadou transported geological samples from mining sites to the capital. Salif modified vehicles to include hidden compartments. Karim, who worked at the main border crossing, ensured certain trucks passed through without thorough inspections. None of them understood they were participating in the systematic theft of their nation's resources. They saw only the cash payments Tina provided and the humanitarian work that gave their activities legitimacy. Chapter 3. The President's Admiration. Captain Ibrahim Traoré had assumed the presidency during turbulent times, leading a military government committed to defending Burkina Faso's sovereignty against foreign interference. At 34, he was young for a head of state, but his passion for his country's independence was absolute. Unlike many African leaders who courted Western approval, Traoré viewed most foreign involvement with deep suspicion. Yet Tina's work appeared different. Her foundation's activities reached communities where even his government struggled to provide services. The medical clinics served areas where state hospitals were non-existent. The agricultural programs increased crop yields in regions prone to famine. The educational initiatives opened doors for children who might otherwise remain illiterate. "This woman understands what Burkina Faso needs," Traoré told his cabinet during a monthly review meeting. "She doesn't come with political conditions or economic demands like other foreign organizations. She simply helps our people." His Minister of Health, Dr. Rasmane Compaoré, nodded enthusiastically. The health statistics from regions where her clinics operate have improved dramatically. Child mortality is down, vaccination rates are up. Her impact is undeniable. Traoré had met Tina personally on several occasions during official functions. She struck him as refreshingly different from the typical European development worker, less condescending, more genuinely invested in local solutions. When she spoke about Burkina Faso, her eyes seemed to light up with authentic affection. "She's one of the few foreigners who truly seems to love our country," he confided to his chief advisor, Colonel Issa Kabore. "She could be working in comfortable offices in Paris or Geneva, but she chooses to live here, to share our struggles." This perception was carefully cultivated by Tina, who had studied Traoré's biography and political philosophy extensively. She knew he valued sovereignty, authenticity, and practical results over rhetorical flourishes. She presented herself as someone who supported his vision of an independent Burkina Faso, someone who wanted to help from within rather than impose solutions from outside. During their conversations, she would express admiration for his leadership, agreement with his policies, and commitment to long-term partnership rather than short-term charity. She spoke passable Mure and basic Dioula, demonstrating respect for local languages. She ate local foods, participated in traditional ceremonies, and seemed genuinely comfortable in rural settings that intimidated many foreign visitors. The president began to see her as a model for positive international cooperation, proof that foreign assistance could respect Burkina Faso dignity while providing genuine help. He spoke about her work in international forums, citing her foundation as an example of the kind of partnership Burkina Faso welcomed. Unknown to him, each public endorsement strengthened Tina's cover and expanded her operational freedom. Government officials treated her foundation's vehicles with special respect. Border guards expedited her shipments. Mining officials welcomed her geological research as contributing to national development. By her second year in Burkina Faso, Tina's operation had reached industrial scale with the precision of a Swiss timepiece and the ruthlessness of a corporate merger. The Hope for Tomorrow Foundation was processing over 2 tons of smuggled gold annually, generating profits exceeding $5 million through a network that spanned 3 continents and involved dozens of unwitting accomplices. The beauty of her system lay in its integration with genuine humanitarian work, creating what intelligence analysts would later describe as the most sophisticated resource extraction scheme in West African history. For every ounce of gold smuggled out, her foundation provided real medical treatment to sick children, built actual schools, and supplied genuine agricultural assistance. Local communities benefited even as their national resources were stolen, creating a moral confusion that protected her from suspicion while simultaneously deepening the eventual betrayal. Her operational methodology was masterful in its simplicity. The Foundation's monthly activity reports documented impressive achievements that were completely accurate. 50,000 people receiving medical treatment, 15,000 children enrolled in educational programs, 3,000 women participating in economic empowerment initiatives, 127 water wells constructed, 43 schools built or renovated, and 12 health clinics established. These numbers weren't fabricated. Tina had learned that the best lies were wrapped in complete truth. The humanitarian work served multiple purposes beyond mere camouflage. It generated legitimate donations that exceeded the Foundation's actual operational costs by significant margins, providing both cover money for gold purchases and personal profit for Tina herself. More importantly, it created an army of grateful beneficiaries who would defend her reputation against any accusations, viewing criticism of their beloved Tante Tina as attacks on their own dignity and judgment. Aminata Sawadogo, her program coordinator, worked 18-hour days, organizing medical campaigns and educational programs with authentic passion for the Foundation's mission. A graduate of the University of Ouagadougou with a degree in public health, Aminata had turned down higher-paying positions with international organizations to work for Tina because she believed in the Foundation's community-centered approach to development. Madame Tina has taught me that real development comes from love, not pity, Aminata would tell visitors to the Foundation's headquarters. She shows us that foreigners can truly become family when they approach Africa with respect rather than superiority. The Foundation's evening activities, conducted after Aminata and the other legitimate staff members had gone home, told an entirely different story. Tina's living room, decorated with traditional Burkina Faso art and photographs of smiling children, served as headquarters for planning systematic resource theft with the cold efficiency of a military operation. Her encrypted satellite phone connected her to handlers in Geneva, Antwerp, and Dubai on a rigid schedule, Tuesdays and Fridays at 11 p.m. local time, using code words that referenced agricultural products to discuss gold shipments, market prices, and logistics arrangements. The millet harvest from the northern cooperatives is ready for export, might refer to. Refined gold from Sahel mining operations ready for international transport. The European end of the operation had evolved into a sophisticated money laundering network that would have impressed organized crime investigators. Profits flowed through Swiss banks using humanitarian donation accounts, then moved to Dubai trading companies specializing in precious metals, before finally reaching cryptocurrency exchanges that converted the funds into untraceable digital assets. Marcus Holloway, the British minerals trader who had initiated Tina's recruitment, later admitted to investigators that the Burkina Faso operation had become their most profitable African venture. She delivered consistent quality and quantity while maintaining perfect operational security, he testified. The humanitarian cover was so convincing that even our intelligence contacts in European governments were completely deceived. The Foundation's vehicle modifications had reached levels of sophistication that impressed even experienced smugglers. Salif Ouedraogo, the mechanic who unknowingly created the hidden compartments, had developed systems that could conceal up to 30 kilograms of gold per truck while maintaining normal weight distribution and passing routine inspections. Madame, Tina was very specific about the requirements. Salif later explained to investigators, his voice heavy with regret. She said the medical equipment was very valuable and needed protection from both thieves and environmental damage. The compartments had to be temperature-controlled, shock-resistant, and completely invisible. I was proud of my work. I thought I was protecting medicine that would save children's lives. The compartments were engineering marvels, built into the chassis of Toyota Land Cruisers and hidden behind false panels that matched the original factory specifications perfectly. GPS tracking devices monitored each vehicle's location in real time, while biometric locks ensured only authorized personnel could access the concealed cargo. Tina's recruitment network had expanded beyond Burkina Faso's borders, incorporating contacts in Ghana, Mali, and Côte d'Ivoire who facilitated cross-border transport and provided alternative routes when security concerns arose. She had even begun training potential replacements, young European professionals, attracted by the combination of humanitarian credentials and enormous profits. Her personal transformation during this period was remarkable to observe. The woman who had arrived in Ouagadougou as a somewhat cynical development worker had become genuinely attached to many aspects of Burkinabe culture. She spoke Mooré fluently now, participated enthusiastically in traditional ceremonies, and had developed real friendships with local families. Yet this genuine affection coexisted with her criminal activities in ways that revealed the complex psychology of systematic deception. She could spend her morning teaching literacy classes to women in rural villages, feeling genuine joy at their progress, then spend her evening coordinating gold shipments worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. I convinced myself I was Robin Hood, she later admitted during her trial testimony. I was stealing from mining companies and government officials who were already exploiting local miners, and I was using the profits to provide services those same officials couldn't or wouldn't provide. The moral gymnastics were elaborate, but I needed to sleep at night. The Foundation's success had also attracted international attention that went far beyond its humanitarian reputation. European intelligence services had begun monitoring its activities, not because they suspected criminal behavior, but because they viewed Tina as a valuable intelligence asset who could provide insights into West African political and economic developments. A classified French intelligence report from this period, later leaked during a parliamentary investigation, described her as an exceptionally valuable human intelligence source who has achieved unprecedented access to local power structures while maintaining complete operational independence. The report recommended increasing unofficial support for her activities without direct French government involvement. This intelligence interest created an additional layer of protection for Tina's operations. European diplomatic personnel would occasionally check on her welfare, ostensibly as routine consular services, but actually as intelligence debriefings. These visits reinforced her status as someone under international protection, further discouraging local suspicions or investigations. Despite Tina's careful planning and multi-layered security measures, the scale of her operation eventually created vulnerabilities that no amount of sophistication could eliminate. The fundamental problem was mathematical. Removing 2 tons of gold annually from a regional economy inevitably created statistical anomalies that trained analysts could detect. Local miners began questioning why certain foreign buyers offered prices significantly above market rates for raw gold, then disappeared from contact after completing transactions. Village elders noticed that some communities were experiencing unexplained prosperity, while their mining output appeared to be declining according to official records. Border communities observed that humanitarian vehicles seemed unusually heavy when leaving the country, requiring more frequent mechanical maintenance than similar vehicles operating entirely within national boundaries. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: Corporal Bukari Sanogo, a 26-year-old military intelligence officer conducting routine surveillance of mining areas near the Ghana border. His assignment was to monitor illegal mining activities that might threaten environmental protection or worker safety, part of the government's broader effort to regulate artisanal mining without destroying the livelihoods it supported. Sanogo had grown up in a mining family in the Boucle du Mouhoun region, where his father and uncles had worked small-scale gold operations for over 30 years. His childhood had been spent around mining sites, giving him an intuitive understanding of normal mining patterns, seasonal variations, and the subtle signs that indicated when operations were being conducted outside official oversight. During a 3-week observation mission in November, positioned in the hills overlooking the Boromo mining district, he noticed patterns that seemed inconsistent with normal humanitarian operations. The Hope for Tomorrow vehicles visited mining sites on predictable schedules every Tuesday and Friday, between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., always during non-business hours when official oversight was minimal. Normal aid work doesn't happen at midnight, he noted in his surveillance log. Medical emergencies are random. Agricultural support follows daylight hours. Educational programs operate during school schedules. But these vehicles followed a schedule that suggested commercial rather than humanitarian priorities. More suspiciously, the drivers avoided main roads despite the additional time and fuel costs, preferring circuitous routes through less monitored areas where checkpoint encounters were unlikely. The vehicles appeared significantly heavier when leaving mining areas than when arriving, evidenced by deeper tire tracks, different suspension behavior, and reduced acceleration on hills. Sanogo began photographing the vehicles and tracking their movements over several months, building a comprehensive database of routes, timing patterns, and operational behaviors. He documented meetings between Foundation drivers and individuals he recognized as known gold traders, captured images of suspicious cargo transfers conducted in remote locations, and recorded conversations that referenced special deliveries and premium samples. His initial reports were dismissed by his immediate superiors, who reminded him that Tina's foundation enjoyed presidential protection and that his suspicions could damage Burkina Faso's international reputation if proven false. "You're seeing conspiracies where none exist," Colonel Issa Kabore told him during a particularly tense briefing. "This woman has been personally endorsed by the president. She's beyond suspicion unless you have absolutely conclusive evidence." But Sanogo persisted. Driven by a combination of professional duty and personal conviction that something was fundamentally wrong with the patterns he was observing. He expanded his surveillance activities, recruiting trusted colleagues to monitor other mining areas and coordinate observations across multiple provinces. The persistence finally caught the attention of Major Yakuba Ouedraogo, head of the military intelligence unit responsible for economic security and a veteran investigator who had spent 15 years tracking various forms of resource smuggling. Unlike his colleagues, Ouedraogo had always harbored doubts about foreign humanitarian organizations, having witnessed too many cases where charitable activities served as cover for economic exploitation. "Show me everything," he told Sanogo during a private meeting conducted away from their headquarters to avoid potential security breaches. "If you're right, this represents a massive security failure that could destabilize our entire mining sector. If you're wrong, we'll quietly close the file and move on. But we need to know the truth, whatever it costs us politically." The investigation that followed was conducted with extraordinary secrecy, using techniques typically reserved for counterintelligence operations against hostile foreign governments. Only 3 officers knew of its existence, and they worked outside normal channels to avoid alerting potential collaborators within the government structure or inadvertently compromising their sources. They monitored Tina's communications using equipment borrowed from France's DGSE intelligence service, ironically using French technology to investigate a French citizen's activities in a former French colony. They tracked her financial transactions through banking relationships with Swiss and Lebanese financial institutions. They documented her network of contacts both locally and internationally, building organizational charts that revealed the scope and sophistication of her operations. The breakthrough came when they intercepted a satellite phone conversation between Tina and her European handlers, discussing a significant increase in extraction quotas to meet rising international demand for gold. The conversation, conducted in a mixture of French and English with extensive use of agricultural metaphors, provided clear evidence of large-scale resource theft orchestrated through humanitarian activities. Her strategy was methodical and ruthless in its efficiency. She would arrive in a village, spend 2 days conducting what she called community consultations, then return within a month with exactly the assistance that would generate the most gratitude and media coverage. A village struggling with maternal mortality would receive a mobile clinic. Communities affected by drought would get water purification systems. Areas with high illiteracy would suddenly find themselves with new schools. In the northern province of Yatenga, she funded the construction of 3 water wells, bringing clean water to villages that had struggled with drought for years. The ceremony marking the completion of the first well was a masterpiece of public relations. Traditional dancers performed while Tina, dressed in locally made clothing, participated in the ritual blessing of the water source. "Today, we celebrate more than water," she declared to the assembled crowd and television cameras. "We celebrate partnership, friendship, and our shared commitment to a better future for Burkina Faso." The village chief, Naaba Kudugu, presented her with an ornate ceremonial sword, declaring her an honorary daughter of their community. "She has brought life to our children," he said, tears streaming down his weathered face. "She is truly our sister." But even as Tina accepted the honor with apparently genuine emotion, her eyes were scanning the surrounding hills, noting the telltale signs of gold-bearing geology that had actually drawn her to this particular region. The water wells were real and functional, but they also provided perfect cover for the geological surveys her team was conducting throughout the area. In the eastern region near Fada and Gourma, she established mobile medical clinics that traveled to remote villages, providing free health care to thousands of people who had never seen a doctor. Local radio stations, which she had subtly subsidized through advertising payments, broadcast stories of miraculous recoveries, of children saved from malaria, of mothers whose lives were preserved during difficult births. The medical work was genuine and professionally executed. Tina had recruited Dr. Sarah Williams, a British physician with extensive experience in tropical medicine, offering her a salary nearly double what she could earn with traditional NGOs. Dr. Williams was completely unaware of the Foundation's hidden agenda and threw herself into the work with passionate dedication. "Tina has created something special here," Dr. Williams told a visiting journalist from BBC Africa. "This isn't typical development tourism. She's building sustainable healthcare systems that will outlast any individual organization." The Foundation's social media presence was expertly managed by a team of young European professionals who had been recruited through legitimate development job boards. They documented every act of charity with professional photography and compelling storytelling. Images of Tina embracing orphaned children, teaching women to read, and working alongside farmers in their fields spread across international networks, generating donations that far exceeded the Foundation's actual humanitarian expenses. "Tina understands our suffering," said Mariam Ouedraogo, a widow whose 3 children had all received life-saving treatment at one of the clinics. "She doesn't just give us money and leave like other foreigners. She stays. She listens. She cares." But beneath this carefully orchestrated symphony of goodwill, Tina was building an entirely different network. During her travels to remote mining areas, always justified as humanitarian scouting missions or site surveys for future projects, she made contact with local miners, assessing their operations, their production capacity, and most importantly, their vulnerabilities. These initial contacts were always handled delicately. She would approach mining cooperatives through local chiefs or religious leaders, presenting herself as someone interested in supporting artisanal mining through fair trade initiatives or environmental protection programs. The miners, desperate for any form of international recognition or assistance, welcomed her visits enthusiastically, Musa Traoré, leader of a small mining cooperative near Boromo, remembered their first meeting vividly. "She came to us through the imam," he later told investigators. "She said she wanted to help us get fair prices for our gold, to connect us with international buyers who wouldn't cheat us. We thought Allah had sent us an angel." Tina's approach was to offer immediate, tangible benefits while gradually introducing more questionable propositions. She would provide mining equipment, safety gear, or small cash advances, building trust and dependency before suggesting arrangements that involved selling gold at below-market prices in exchange for guaranteed purchases and protection from government interference. Her evening phone calls to Europe were conducted in coded language, discussing agricultural exports and mineral samples with contacts in Geneva, Antwerp, and Dubai. She had identified 17 separate mining sites across 4 provinces where gold could be extracted and smuggled without detection, each one carefully mapped and evaluated for both production potential and security risks. The Foundation's fleet of vehicles, marked with the Hope for Tomorrow logo, became a familiar sight on roads throughout the country. Local checkpoints waved them through without inspection. Who would suspect vehicles carrying medical supplies and educational materials? The trucks were modified by Salif Ouedraogo, a skilled mechanic from Ouagadougou, who believed he was helping improve the Foundation's logistics capabilities. "Madame Tina asked me to create secure storage areas for valuable medical equipment," Salif later explained to investigators. "She was worried about theft during transport. I thought I was protecting vaccines and surgical instruments." The hidden compartments were engineering marvels, virtually undetectable even during routine inspections, capable of holding significant quantities of raw gold while maintaining the appearance of legitimate humanitarian cargo. Temperature controls and padding protected the concealed cargo, while GPS tracking allowed the European handlers to monitor shipment movements in real time. Tina recruited a network of local collaborators, mostly desperate young men who needed money to support their families. Her recruitment strategy preyed on economic vulnerability while maintaining plausible deniability about the operation's true nature. She never told them the full scope of the operation. Each knew only their small part. Amadou Sankara, a university graduate struggling to find employment, was hired to coordinate geological sample collection from mining sites to research facilities in the capital. His job was to pick up packages from cooperative leaders and deliver them to a laboratory in Ouaga 2000, never knowing that the samples were actually refined gold ready for international shipment. "She gave me hope when I had none," Amadou later testified. "I was supporting my parents and 3 younger siblings. The salary she offered was more than most government jobs. I never questioned what was in those packages. I trusted her completely." Karim Compaoré, who worked at the main border crossing with Ghana, was recruited through his cousin, who worked as a driver for the Foundation. Tina approached him with a proposition wrapped in patriotic language. Help. Facilitate the rapid passage of humanitarian supplies to emergency situations by ensuring minimal bureaucratic delays. She explained that children could die while our trucks waited at borders, Karim recalled. "She showed me letters from doctors pleading for urgent medical supplies. How could I refuse to help save lives? None of them understood they were participating in the systematic theft of their nation's resources. They saw only the cash payments Tina provided, the humanitarian work that gave their activities legitimacy, and her apparent dedication to improving their country's development prospects." Captain Ibrahim Traoré had assumed the presidency during turbulent times, leading a military government committed to defending Burkina Faso's sovereignty against foreign interference. At 34, he was young for a head of state, but his passion for his country's independence was absolute and had been forged through years of witnessing external manipulation of African nations. Born in the rural village of Bondakui, Traoré had grown up watching his community struggle with the paradox of living atop significant mineral wealth while remaining desperately poor. His father, a small-scale gold miner, had often spoken bitterly about foreign companies that would arrive with promises of partnership but leave with trucks full of raw materials while local communities remained unchanged. The white man comes with one hand, extended in friendship and the other hand in your pocket, his father had warned him. This lesson shaped Traoré's worldview long before he entered military service, where he witnessed firsthand how international aid often came with invisible strings attached. Unlike many African leaders who courted Western approval, Traoré viewed most foreign involvement with deep suspicion born from historical experience. The French colonial period had lasted until 1960, but its economic structures persisted through what critics called France-Afrique, a system of post-colonial control that maintained French access to African resources through compliant local elites. Yet Tina's work appeared different from this historical pattern. Her foundation's activities reached communities where even his government struggled to provide services. The medical clinics served areas where state hospitals were non-existent. The agricultural programs increased crop yields in regions prone to famine. The educational initiatives opened doors for children who might otherwise remain trapped in generational poverty. This woman understands what Burkina Faso needs, Traoré told his cabinet during a monthly review meeting in the presidential palace. The conference room was modest by international standards, a simple table surrounded by chairs, maps of the country on the walls, no air conditioning despite the Sahel heat. This simplicity was deliberate. Traoré insisted that government should reflect the reality of the people it served. His Minister of Health, Dr. Rasmane Compaoré, nodded enthusiastically while consulting a thick folder of statistics. The health indicators from regions where her clinics operate have improved dramatically, Mr. President. Child mortality is down 23%. Vaccination rates have increased from 41% to 78%. Maternal death rates have decreased by 30%. Her impact is quantifiable and significant. Defense Minister Colonel Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba added his own observations. The rural communities speak of her with genuine affection. Our intelligence reports indicate no political agenda, no attempts to build personal power bases. She seems genuinely focused on development work. Traoré had met Tina personally on several occasions during official functions and state ceremonies honoring international development partners. She struck him as refreshingly different from the typical European development worker, less condescending, more genuinely invested in local solutions, more respectful of traditional cultural practices. During their first meeting at a reception celebrating International Women's Day, Tina had approached him with a detailed proposal for expanding healthcare access in rural areas. But instead of the typical Western presentation style, PowerPoint slides full of statistics and glossy photos, she had brought along Mariam Ouedraogo, one of the women whose life had been saved by her medical program. "Mr. President," Tina had said, "rather than telling you about our work, I thought you should hear directly from someone who has benefited from it." Mariam, speaking in Moray with Tina providing translation, described the night her youngest son had nearly died from severe malaria. The nearest government health facility was over 60 kilometers away, and they had no transportation. Tina's mobile clinic had arrived within hours of receiving the emergency call, providing the intravenous treatment that saved the child's life. "She didn't just save my son," Mariam concluded. "She taught our village women how to recognize the early signs of malaria, how to prepare oral rehydration solutions, how to care for our families better. She gave us knowledge, not just medicine." This encounter deeply impressed Traoré, who had grown tired of foreign visitors who spoke about Africa without ever listening to Africans. Tina seemed to understand that sustainable development required local ownership and capacity building, not just charitable handouts. When she spoke about Burkina Faso during their subsequent meetings, her eyes seemed to light up with authentic affection. She had learned basic greetings in Moray and Dioula, the country's major local languages. She participated enthusiastically in traditional ceremonies, showing genuine respect for cultural practices that many foreigners found primitive or inconvenient. "She's one of the few foreigners who truly seems to love our country," he confided to his chief advisor, Colonel Issa Kabore, after a state dinner where Tina had spent hours discussing agricultural techniques with local farmers rather than networking with diplomats and dignitaries. She could be working in comfortable offices in Paris or Geneva, but she chooses to live here, to share our struggles, to understand our realities. This perception was carefully cultivated by Tina, who had studied Traoré's biography and political philosophy extensively during her preparation for the mission. She knew he valued sovereignty, authenticity, and practical results over rhetorical flourishes. She presented herself as someone who supported his vision of an independent Burkina Faso, someone who wanted to help from within rather than impose solutions from outside. During their conversations, she would express admiration for his leadership, agreement with his policies regarding economic sovereignty, and commitment to long-term partnership rather than short-term charity projects. She spoke knowledgeably about the country's history, referencing the legacy of Thomas Sankara and other independents, leaders in ways that demonstrated genuine respect for Burkinabe nationalism. The mistake many international organizations make, she told him during one memorable conversation, is assuming they know what Africa needs without asking Africans. My approach is different. I listen first, then try to support local solutions rather than importing foreign ones. The president began to see her as a model for positive international cooperation, proof that foreign assistance could respect Burkinabe dignity while providing genuine help. He spoke about her work in international forums, citing her foundation as an example of the kind of partnership Burkina Faso welcomed, the kind that strengthened rather than undermined national sovereignty. "We don't need saviors," he declared at an African Union summit on development partnerships. "We need partners who respect our intelligence and support our own efforts to build better futures." Organizations like the Hope for Tomorrow Foundation show that such partnerships are possible when they're based on mutual respect rather than neo-colonial assumptions. Unknown to him, each public endorsement strengthened Tina's cover and expanded her operational freedom. Government officials began treating her foundation's vehicles with special respect, assuming presidential approval for all activities. Border guards expedited her shipments, viewing any bureaucratic delays as potential obstacles to presidentially endorsed humanitarian work. Mining officials welcomed her geological research as contributing to national development planning. The irony was particularly bitter. Traoré's genuine commitment to protecting Burkina Faso's resources from foreign exploitation was being used to facilitate the largest resource theft in the country's recent history. His trust, earned through Tina's skillful manipulation, became the very weapon used against his people's interests. By her second year in Burkina Faso, Tina's operation had reached industrial scale. The Hope for Tomorrow Foundation was processing over 2 tons of smuggled gold annually, generating profits exceeding $5 million. Her European contacts had established sophisticated money laundering networks, with profits flowing through Swiss banks, Dubai trading companies, and cryptocurrency exchanges. The beauty of her system lay in its integration with genuine humanitarian work. For every ounce of gold smuggled out, her foundation provided real medical treatment to sick children, built actual schools, and supplied genuine agricultural assistance. Local communities benefited even as their national resources were stolen, creating a moral confusion that protected her from suspicion. Her staff, mostly dedicated young Burkinabe professionals, worked with authentic passion for their humanitarian mission. They had no knowledge of the gold smuggling and genuinely believed in Tina's commitment to their country's development. Their sincere enthusiasm provided perfect camouflage for her activities. Aminata Sawadogo, her program coordinator, often worked 18-hour days organizing medical campaigns and educational programs. "Madame Tina has taught me that real development comes from love," she would tell visitors. "She shows us that foreigners can truly become family." The Foundation's monthly reports documented impressive achievements: 50,000 people receiving medical treatment, 15,000 children enrolled in educational programs, 3,000 women participating in economic empowerment initiatives. These numbers were entirely accurate. Tina had learned that the best lies were wrapped in complete truth. Meanwhile, her evening activities told a different story. After her staff had gone home and the compound was quiet, she would meet with her mining contacts, reviewing production reports and shipment schedules. Her living room, decorated with traditional Burkinabe art and photographs of smiling children, served as headquarters for planning systematic resource theft. Her encrypted communications with European handlers became increasingly confident. "Local trust is complete," she reported in one message. "Government protection is guaranteed. Operations can expand significantly without detection risk." She had even begun recruiting additional European operators, young professionals attracted by the combination of humanitarian credentials and enormous profits. Her network was evolving from a solo operation into an international organization, with Burkina Faso serving as a testing ground for similar schemes across West Africa. Despite Tina's careful planning, the scale of her operation eventually created vulnerabilities. Local miners began questioning why certain foreign buyers offered prices significantly above market rates for raw gold. Border communities noticed that some humanitarian vehicles seemed unusually heavy when leaving the country. A few incorruptible customs officials started asking uncomfortable questions about geological sample shipments. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: Corporal Bukari Sanogo, a young military intelligence officer conducting routine surveillance of mining areas near the Ghana border. His assignment was to monitor illegal mining activities that might threaten environmental protection or worker safety. During a weeks-long observation mission, he noticed patterns that seemed inconsistent with normal humanitarian operations. The Hope for Tomorrow vehicles visited mining sites on predictable schedules, always during non-business hours. Their drivers avoided main roads, preferring circuitous routes through less monitored areas. Most suspiciously, the vehicles appeared significantly heavier when leaving mining areas than when arriving. Sanogo's initial reports were dismissed by his superiors, who reminded him that Tina's foundation enjoyed presidential protection. "You're seeing conspiracies where none exist," Colonel Caboret told him. "This woman is beyond suspicion." But Sanogo persisted, gathering photographic evidence and tracking vehicle movements over several months. He documented meetings between Foundation drivers and known gold smugglers, captured images of suspicious cargo transfers, and recorded conversations that suggested large-scale illegal activities. His persistence finally caught the attention of Major Yakuba Ouedraogo, head of the military intelligence unit responsible for economic security. Unlike his colleagues, Ouedraogo had always harbored doubts about foreign humanitarian organizations, having witnessed too many cases where charity served as cover for exploitation. "Show me everything," he told Sanogo during a private meeting. "If you're right, this represents a massive security breach. If you're wrong, we'll quietly close the file, but we need to know the truth." The investigation that followed was conducted with extraordinary secrecy. Only 3 officers knew of its existence, and they worked outside normal channels to avoid alerting potential collaborators within the government. They monitored Tina's communications, tracked her financial transactions, and documented her network of contacts both locally and internationally. Within 6 months, they had compiled irrefutable evidence of systematic gold smuggling orchestrated through humanitarian activities. The scope of the theft was staggering. Preliminary estimates suggested over $10 million in stolen resources, with profits flowing to European criminal networks. The sealed intelligence report arrived on President Traoré's desk on a Tuesday morning in March, delivered personally by Major Ouedraogo with instructions that it be opened only in complete privacy. The president was reviewing budget allocations for rural healthcare programs, a bitter irony given the contents of the document he was about to read, which would reveal how healthcare had been used as a cover for the largest resource theft in his country's modern history. The manila folder was thicker than typical intelligence briefs, its weight suggesting the comprehensive nature of the investigation within. As Traoré broke the wax seal and began reading, the morning sunlight streaming through his office windows seemed to dim, as if the revelations contained in those pages were literally casting shadows across his understanding of recent events. The executive summary was devastating in its stark clarity. Operation Golden Hope, systematic resource extraction through humanitarian cover. Subject, Christine Tina Dubois, French national. Period, April 2022. Present. Estimated losses, $15.7 million. USD status. Ongoing criminal. Enterprise with international connections. The first section detailed Tina's background with a thoroughness that revealed how little he had actually known about the woman he had publicly praised and privately trusted. Born Christine Marie Dubois in Lyon, France, to wealthy parents who had made their fortune in African timber exports during the 1980s and 1990s, educated at elite institutions but with a pattern of employment terminations related to financial irregularities. Previous assignments in Chad, Mali, and Niger that had ended under circumstances suggesting misconduct, though formal charges had never been filed. Subject demonstrates consistent pattern of exploiting humanitarian credentials to facilitate resource extraction operations, the report noted. European intelligence services have maintained informal contact but denied direct recruitment or operational control. The financial analysis section documented massive discrepancies between the Foundation's reported expenses and actual expenditures that were impossible to explain through accounting errors or administrative inefficiency. The Hope for Tomorrow Foundation claimed to spend $2.3 million annually on humanitarian programs, but forensic accounting revealed actual operational costs of approximately $600,000. The remaining $1.7 million had simply vanished into a network of offshore accounts and shell companies. Then came the photographic evidence that made denial impossible. Foundation vehicles at remote mining sites during midnight hours, their distinctive white paint and organizational logos clearly visible under infrared photography. Suspicious cargo transfers conducted in isolated locations, with individuals identifiable as both Foundation employees and known gold smugglers. Meetings in Ouagadougou, hotels between Tina and European nationals who had entered the country on tourist visas but whose backgrounds suggested commercial rather than recreational interests. But the audio recordings were the most damaging evidence. Conversations intercepted through sophisticated surveillance equipment that revealed the true nature of Tina's activities in her own words. Her voice, which he remembered as warm and sincere during their official meetings, sounded cold and calculating as she discussed mineral exports, production quotas, and European market demands in language that clearly referred to illegal gold trading rather than humanitarian assistance. One recording was particularly devastating. A conversation with her Geneva handlers where she laughed about the ease of deceiving local officials. "The president actually thanked me publicly for my contribution to national development," her voice crackled through the static. "He has no idea that I'm extracting more value from his country in a single month than his government's entire annual healthcare budget. These Africans are so desperate for international attention that they'll believe anything if you package it properly." The report's final section contained financial records obtained through international intelligence cooperation, documenting bank transfers that revealed the full scope of the money laundering operation. Millions of dollars flowing from Swiss accounts to Dubai trading companies, then to cryptocurrency exchanges that converted the funds into untraceable digital assets. The financial trail led to luxury properties in Geneva, investment portfolios in London, and business ventures across Europe, all financed by stolen African gold. Traoré read the entire report 3 times, his hands trembling as the implications became clear. The woman he had publicly praised as a model humanitarian was actually orchestrating the largest resource theft in his country's recent history. The foundation he had cited as proof of positive international cooperation was a criminal enterprise masquerading as charity. The trust he had extended, the protection he had provided, the international reputation he had invested, all had been weaponized against his own people. The personal betrayal cut deepest of all. He remembered their conversations about sovereignty and independence, her apparent understanding of his vision for Burkina Faso's future. She had seemed to genuinely care about his people's struggles, to share his commitment to authentic development rather than neo-colonial exploitation. He had even confided in her about his fears that foreign interests were attempting to manipulate his government, never suspecting that she was the primary agent of such manipulation. "She studied my psychology like a textbook," he whispered to himself. staring out at the lights of Ouagadougou beginning to twinkle in the evening darkness. She identified my values, my fears, my aspirations, and she told me exactly what I wanted to hear while doing exactly what I was trying to prevent. The broader implications were equally troubling and extended far beyond Tina's individual crimes. If one person could operate for over 2 years without detection, deceiving everyone from village chiefs to the president himself, how many other foreign organizations might be engaged in similar deceptions? How much of Burkina Faso's resources were being stolen under the guise of international cooperation? How many other African countries were experiencing similar exploitation without realizing it? Sleep was impossible that night. Traoré walked through the presidential residence, past portraits of previous leaders who had fought against colonialism and economic exploitation. Men like Maurice Yameogo, who had led the country to independence, and Thomas Sankara, who had died defending African dignity against foreign control. He felt the weight of their legacy, the responsibility to protect what they had sacrificed to build, the obligation to ensure that their vision of African independence was not being gradually eroded through sophisticated deception. The economic calculations were staggering. The stolen gold could have funded the construction of 200 additional schools, providing education for over 50,000 children. It could have equipped 50 health clinics with modern medical facilities, potentially saving thousands of lives annually. It could have provided clean water access for over 100,000 people in rural communities where waterborne diseases remained a leading cause of death. But beyond the immediate financial losses was the deeper damage to social trust and national morale. How could his people maintain faith in international cooperation if their generosity and openness were being systematically exploited? How could they distinguish between genuine partners and sophisticated predators if the deception was so complete that even experienced officials were fooled? By dawn, his decision was crystallizing despite the personal and political costs it would entail. Tina would face justice, but not quietly through diplomatic channels that would allow the crime to be minimized or covered up. The exposure of her activities would serve as a warning to other potential exploiters and a lesson to his own people about the dangers of naive trust in foreign benevolence, regardless of how attractively it might be packaged. The presidential convoy arrived at the Hope for Tomorrow compound without warning on a Thursday morning. Tina was conducting a staff meeting, reviewing plans for a new educational initiative in the eastern provinces. The sound of military vehicles in the courtyard initially caused concern but not panic. Presidential visits to successful humanitarian organizations were not unprecedented. "Madame," Aminata announced from the doorway, "President Traoré is here to see you." Tina felt a momentary flutter of uncertainty, but quickly composed herself. She had met with the president several times and always found him respectful and supportive. Perhaps he was announcing increased government cooperation or inviting her to participate in a new development initiative. She stepped outside to greet him, noting the unusual formality of his security detail and the serious expressions on accompanying officials' faces. Still, she maintained her confident composure, extending her hand with a warm smile. "Mr. President," she said in French, "what an unexpected pleasure. Please come inside. You honor us with your visit." Traoré did not take her offered hand. His face was stone, his eyes cold with controlled anger. "We need to speak privately," he said simply. Inside her office, surrounded by photographs of her humanitarian work and testimonials from grateful beneficiaries, Tina offered him tea and engaged in the polite small talk that typically preceded their conversations. But something felt different. His responses were curt, his posture rigid. "Tina," he said finally, cutting through her pleasantries, "I need you to explain something to me." He placed a thick folder on her desk and opened it to reveal the intelligence report's most damaging evidence. The first photograph showed one of her foundation's trucks at a remote mining site, clearly being loaded with unmarked cargo at 2 a.m. Her smile faltered slightly, but she maintained her composure. "I'm not sure what this is supposed to show," she said carefully. "Our medical teams sometimes work unusual hours to reach remote communities." The next photograph showed the same truck at a border crossing, with the hidden compartment open and raw gold clearly visible. The third captured her personally supervising a transaction with known smugglers. Medical supplies? Traoré asked quietly. The blood drained from Tina's face. She stared at the photographs, her mind racing through possible explanations, denials, deflections. But the evidence was too comprehensive, too damning to explain away. "Mr. President," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I think there's been some misunderstanding." "The misunderstanding," he interrupted, "was mine. I thought you loved Burkina Faso. I thought you came here to help my people, but you came to rob them." The facade finally cracked. Tears welled in her eyes as she realized the hopelessness of her situation. The careful construction of trust and reputation that had protected her for over 2 years had collapsed in minutes. "Please," she whispered, falling to her knees. "Let me explain. I never wanted to hurt anyone. The humanitarian work is real. We've helped thousands of people. With profits from stolen gold," Traoré replied coldly. "You built schools with money stolen from the miners who could have used it to educate their own children. You provided medicine bought with resources that belonged to sick people you claimed to help." Her tears became sobs as the full weight of her crimes became clear. For the first time since arriving in Burkina Faso, she saw herself through her victim's eyes, not as a savior, but as a sophisticated thief who had weaponized their trust and desperation. As her emotional defense crumbled, Tina made increasingly desperate attempts to escape consequences. She offered to return all stolen profits, to testify against her European handlers, to continue her humanitarian work under government supervision. When those failed, she attempted more personal appeals. "Ibrahim," she said, using his first name for the first time, moving closer to him as her security escort allowed. "We've worked together. You know I care about this country. I made mistakes, but my heart was in the right place." She reached out to touch his arm, her eyes searching his face for any sign of the respect and friendship she thought they had shared. "I can make this right. I can be more valuable to you as an ally than as a prisoner." Traoré stepped back sharply, his expression hardening further. "Don't insult me with your body, and don't insult my intelligence with your lies. You think Burkina men are so weak that we can be bought with flesh? You think our honor is so cheap?" The rejection was complete and devastating. In that moment, Tina realized that all her careful cultivation of personal relationships, all her cultural adaptation and linguistic efforts, had been nothing more than performance art. She had never truly understood or respected the people she was manipulating. "You will face justice," Traoré continued, "not in secret, not through diplomatic channels, but in front of the people you betrayed. They deserve to see your true face." As she was led away in handcuffs, her staff watched in shock and confusion. Many refused to believe what they were seeing. Aminata ran after the presidential convoy, crying and demanding explanations that no one could provide. The compound that had been bustling with humanitarian activity fell silent. The children who had played in the courtyard were kept away. The medical clinic suspended operations. The educational programs were frozen pending investigation. Within hours, news of her arrest spread throughout Ouagadougou. The reaction was immediate and visceral: disbelief, anger, heartbreak, and demands for answers. The woman who had been universally beloved became the focus of a national trauma that would take years to heal. The trial of Tina Dubois became one of the most significant events in Burkina Faso's recent history. President Traoré insisted it be conducted publicly, with full media coverage and complete transparency. The people were deceived, he declared. They deserved to understand how and why. The evidence presented over 5 days of hearings painted a comprehensive picture of systematic exploitation. Financial experts detailed the money laundering networks. Mining officials explained how geological surveys had been used to identify profitable extraction sites. Communications specialists decoded the encrypted messages that coordinated international smuggling operations. But the most powerful testimony came from Tina's victims, not just those whose resources were stolen, but those whose trust had been weaponized. Aminata took the stand to describe her genuine belief in the Foundation's mission and her heartbreak upon discovering the truth. She made me believe that foreigners could truly love Burkina Faso. Aminata testified through tears. She made me proud to work with her. Now I don't know if anything we accomplished was real. The international response was predictably polarized. European media portrayed Tina as a scapegoat for broader economic problems, while African commentators praised Traoré for exposing neo-colonial exploitation. Diplomatic pressure mounted for her release, with threats of economic sanctions and aid suspension. But public opinion within Burkina Faso was overwhelmingly supportive of the government's actions. Demonstrations filled the streets of Ouagadougou, with crowds chanting, "Burkina Faso is not for sale" and "Justice for our stolen gold." Tina's testimony on the final day was a mixture of confession and self-justification. She admitted to orchestrating the smuggling operation, but claimed she had been coerced by more powerful interests. She insisted her humanitarian work was genuine, even if funded by criminal proceeds. "I loved this country," she said, her voice barely audible. "I loved the children, the communities, the hope in people's eyes. I just lost my way." The judge, Rasmane Sawadogo, delivered a verdict that balanced justice with mercy. Tina was sentenced to 15 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution for stolen resources. But she would serve her sentence in Burkina Faso, allowing her to contribute to the development work she claimed to value through prison labor programs. "You will have 15 years to demonstrate whether your love for Burkina Faso was real," Judge Sawadogo declared. "You can spend that time building what you spent 2 years destroying." 5 years after Tina's conviction, Burkina Faso had fundamentally transformed its approach to international cooperation. New oversight mechanisms monitored all foreign humanitarian organizations. Financial transparency requirements exposed hidden funding sources. Local communities received training to identify potential exploitation schemes. President Traoré, now in his second term, often referenced the Tina case when discussing sovereignty and economic security. "She taught us that the most dangerous enemies are those who come wearing the mask of friendship," he would say. "But she also taught us that we are strong enough to defend ourselves when we stay vigilant." The Hope for Tomorrow compound was converted into a training center for African development professionals, with a mission to ensure that humanitarian work remained truly humanitarian. A bronze plaque at the entrance bore a simple inscription: "Let truth guide all service to humanity." Tina herself adapted to prison life with the same energy she had once devoted to deception. She taught literacy classes, helped design water sanitation systems, and coordinated medical care for fellow inmates. Whether her transformation was genuine or another performance remained unclear, but her contributions were undeniably valuable. Aminata, after months of grief and self-doubt, founded her own NGO focused on community-led development. "Tina taught me that real change must come from within," she explained. "We cannot wait for saviors from outside. We must save ourselves." The stolen gold was never fully recovered. Much had already been processed and sold on international markets. But the symbolic victory was more important than the material loss. Burkina Faso had demonstrated that African nations could expose and punish exploitation, even when perpetrated by those they had trusted most. In the dusty streets of Ouagadougou, children still played games inspired by the Tina story, acting out scenes of deception and justice. But they no longer ran after foreign aid workers' vehicles chanting praise. They had learned, as their nation had learned, that trust must be earned through transparent actions, not charming words. The golden deception had ended, but its lessons would endure for generations. Burkina Faso had paid a heavy price for those lessons, but emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined to control its own destiny. In a continent still struggling with the legacies of exploitation, it stood as proof that vigilance and courage could triumph over even the most sophisticated forms of betrayal.